Hello and welcome to the latest reading from If Only They Could Talk by James Herriot. This is chapters 23 and 24. Milk fever is one of the straightforward conditions, but looking down into the beck in the dreary dawn light, I realised that this was one of its more bizarre manifestations. The illness had struck immediately after calving, and the cow had slithered down the muddy bank into the water. She was unconscious when I arrived, her hindquarters completely submerged, the head resting on a shelf of rock. Her calf, sodden and pathetic in the driving rain, trembled by her side. Dan Cooper's eyes were anxious as we made our way down. "No doubt we're too late. She's dead, isn't she? I can't see her breathing." "Pretty far gone, I'm afraid," I replied. "But I think there's still life there. If I can get some calcium into her vein, she might still come round." "Damn, I hope so," Dan grunted. "She's one of my best milkers. It allus happens to the good uns. It does with milk fever anyway. Here, hold these bottles for me." I pulled out the syringe box and selected a wide-bored needle. My fingers, numb with the special kind of cold you felt in the early morning, with your circulation sluggish and your stomach empty, could hardly hold it. The water was deeper than I thought, and it was over my Wellington tops at the first stride. Gasping, I bent down and dug my thumb into the jugular furrow at the base of the neck. The vein came up, and as I pushed the needle in, the blood ran warm and dark over my hand. I fumbled the flutter valve from my pocket, pushed a bottle into the cup end, and inserted the other end into the needle. The calcium began to flow into the vein. Standing there in the icy beck, holding the bottle aloft with bloody fingers and feeling the rain working its way inside my collar, I tried to keep out the black thoughts about all those people I knew who were still in bed and would only leave it when their alarm clocks rang, and they would read their papers over breakfast and drive out to their cosy banks or insurance offices. Maybe I should have been a doctor. They treated their patients in nice warm bedrooms. I pulled the needle from the vein and threw the empty bottle onto the bank. There was no response to the injection. I took the other bottle and began to run more calcium under the skin. Might as well go through the motions, futile though it seemed now. It was when I was rubbing away the subcutaneous injection that I noticed the eyelids quiver. A quick ripple of relief and excitement went through me. I looked up at the farmer and laughed. "She's still with us, Dan." I flicked her ear and her eyes opened wide. "We'll wait a few minutes and then try to roll her onto her chest." Within a quarter of an hour she was beginning to toss her head about, and I knew it was time. I caught hold of her horns and pulled while Dan and his tall son pushed at her shoulder. We made slow progress, but after several concerted heaves, the cow took over herself and settled on her chest. Immediately everything looked rosier. When a cow is lying on her side, she always has the look of death on her. I was pretty sure then that she would recover, but I couldn't go away and leave her lying in the beck. Milk fever cows can stay down for days on end, but I had the feeling this one would be up soon. I decided to stick it out a bit longer. She didn't seem to relish her situation in the peaty water, and began to make determined efforts to rise. But it was another half hour, and my teeth were chattering uncontrollably before she finally staggered to her feet. "Well, that's a licker," Dan said. "I never thought she'd stand again. Must be good stuff you gave her." "It's a bit quicker than the old bicycle pump," I laughed. The spectacular effects of intravenous calcium were still enough of a novelty to intrigue me. For generations, cows with milk fever had just died. Then inflammation of the udder had saved many, but the calcium was the thing. When they got up within an hour, like this one, I always felt like a successful conjurer. We guided the cow up the bank, and at the top the full force of the wind and rain struck us. The house was only 100 yards away, and we battled towards it. Dan and his son leading, holding the calf in a sack slung between them. The tiny animal swung to and fro, screwing up its eyes against the hard world it had entered. Close behind followed the anxious mother, still rocky on her legs, but doing her best to poke her muzzle into the sack. I squelched along in the rear. We left the cow knee-deep in straw in a warm shed, licking her calf vigorously. In the porch of the house the others dutifully pulled off their Wellingtons. I did the same, pouring about a pint of beckwater from each boot. Mrs. Cooper had the reputation of being a firebrand who exercised an iron rule over Dan and her family, but from my previous contacts with her, I had the feeling that Dan didn't do so badly. I thought so again as I saw her, square-built but comely, plaiting a little girl's pigtails in readiness for school. A crackling fire was mirrored in the gleaming brass of the hearth, and above the clean farmhouse smell there was a hint of home-cured bacon just beginning to fry. Mrs. Cooper sent Dan and the boy scurrying upstairs to change their socks when she turned a calm gaze on me as I dripped on her linoleum. She shook her head as though I were a naughty child. "All right, up with the socks," she rapped out, "and your coat, and roll up your trousers and sit down here and dry your hair with this." A clean towel landed on my lap, and Mrs. Cooper bent over me. "Don't you ever think of wearing a hat?" "Not keen on them, I'm afraid," I mumbled, and she shook her head again. She poured hot water from a kettle into a large bowl and added mustard from a fountain. "Here, stick your feet in this." I had obeyed all her commands with alacrity, and I gave an involuntary yelp as I made contact with the bubbling mixture. At this she shot a fierce glance at me, and I took care to keep my feet in the bowl. I was sitting, teeth clenched, enveloped in steam, when she pushed a pint pot of tea into my hand. It was old-fashioned treatment, but effective. By the time I was halfway down the pint pot, I felt as though I were being consumed by fire. The riverbed chill was a dream which vanished completely, as Mrs. Cooper topped up my bowl with another scalding quart from the kettle. Next, she grabbed chair and bowl and swivelled me round till I was sitting at the table, still with my feet in the water. Dan and the children were already at their breakfast, and in front of me was a plate with 2 eggs, a rough-cut piece of bacon, and several sausages. I had learned enough of Dale's ways to keep quiet at meals. When I first came to the district, I had thought it incumbent on me to provide light conversation in return for their hospitality, but the questioning glances they exchanged with each other silenced me effectively. So this morning I attacked the food without preamble, but the first mouthful almost made me break my newfound rule. It was the first time I had tasted a homemade Yorkshire sausage, and it was an effort to restrain the cries of congratulation which would have been natural in other circles. But Mrs. Cooper had been watching me out of the corner of her eye, and she must have noticed my rapt expression. Casually she rose, brought over the frying pan, and rolled a few more links on my plate. "Killed a pig last week," she said, pulling open the pantry door. I could see the dishes heaped with chopped meat, spare rib. I could see the dishes heaped with chopped meat, spare rib, liver, the rows of pies with the jelly gleaming on their pale gold crusts. I finished my meal, pulled on a thick pair of socks borrowed from Dan, and my dry shoes. I was about to leave when Mrs. Cooper tucked a parcel under my arm. I knew it contained further samples from the pantry, but her eyes dared me to say much about it. I muttered a few words of thanks and went out to the car. The church clock was chiming 9:15 when I pulled up outside Skeldale House. I felt good, warm, full of superb food, and with the satisfying memory of the cow's quick recovery. And there was my parcel on the back seat. It was always a stroke of luck to land on a farm after a pig killing, and there was usually a gift from the hospitable farmers. But these sausages were something I would never forget. I took the surgery steps at a jump and trotted along the passage, but as I rounded the corner, my progress was halted. Siegfried was standing there, rigid, his back pressed against the wall. Over his shoulder dangled a long, flexible leather probang. Between us was the half-open door of the office with Miss Harbottle clearly visible at her desk. I waved cheerfully. "Hello, hello. Off to a choke?" Siegfried's face twisted in anguish and he held up a warning hand. Then he began to creep past the door, balancing on the balls of his feet like a tightrope walker. He was beyond the door and the tense lines of his body had begun to relax when the brass end of the swinging probang clattered against the wall, and, as if in reply, came the familiar rumble from Miss Harbottle's corner. Siegfried gave me a single despairing glance, then, shoulders drooping, he went slowly into the room. Watching him go, I thought wonderingly of how things had built up since the secretary's arrival. It was naked war now, and it gave life an added interest to observe the tactics of the two sides. At the beginning it seemed that Siegfried must run out an easy winner. He was the employer, he held the reins, and it appeared that Miss Harbottle would be helpless in the face of his obstructive strategy. But Miss Harbottle was a fighter and a resourceful one, and it was impossible not to admire the way she made use of the weapons at her command. In fact, over the past week the tide had been running in her favour. She had been playing Siegfried like an expert fisherman with a salmon, bringing him repeatedly back to her desk to answer footling questions. Her throat clearing had developed into an angry bark which could penetrate the full extent of the house. And she had a new weapon. She had taken to writing Siegfried's clerical idiocies on slips of paper. Misspellings, errors in addition, wrong entries, they were all faithfully copied down. Miss Harbottle used these slips as ammunition. She never brought one out when things were slack and her employer was hanging about the surgery. She saved them until he was under pressure, then she would push a slip under his nose and say, "How about this?" She always kept an expressionless face at these times, and it was impossible to say how much pleasure it gave her to see him cower back like a whipped animal. But the end was unvarying mumbled explanations and apologies from Siegfried, and Miss Harbottle, radiating self-righteousness, correcting the entry. As Siegfried went into the room, I watched through the partly open door. I knew my morning round was waiting, but I was impelled by morbid curiosity. Miss Harbottle, looking brisk and businesslike, was tapping an entry in the book with her pen, while Siegfried shuffled his feet and muttered replies. He made several vain attempts to escape, and, as the time passed, I could see he was nearing breaking point. His teeth were clenched, and his eyes had started to bulge. The phone rang, and the secretary answered it. Her employer was making again for the door when she called happily, "Colonel Brent for you." Like a man in a dream, he turned back. The colonel, a racehorse owner, had been a thorn in our flesh for a long time with his complaints and his continual questioning and probing. A call from him was always liable to send up the blood pressure. I could see it was that way this morning. The minutes ticked away and Siegfried's face got redder. He made his replies in a choked voice which finally rose almost to a shout. At the end he crushed the receiver down and leaned on the desk, breathing heavily. Then, as I watched, unbelieving, Miss Harbottle began to open the drawer where she kept her slips. She fished one out, coughed, and held it in Siegfried's face. "How about this?" she asked. I resisted the impulse to close my eyes and stared in horror. For a few seconds nothing happened, and there was a tense interval while Siegfried stood quite motionless. Then his face seemed to break up, and with a skiving sweep of his arm, he snatched the slip from the secretary's hand and began to tear at it with fierce intensity. He didn't say a word, but as he tore, he leaned forward over the desk, and his glaring eyes approached ever nearer to Miss Harbottle, who slowly edged her chair back till it was jammed against the wall. It was a weird picture. Miss Harbottle straining back, her mouth slightly open, her tinted curls bobbing in alarm, and Siegfried, his ravished features close to hers, still tearing with insane vigour at the piece of paper. The scene ended when Siegfried, putting every ounce of his strength into an action like a javelin thrower, hurled the torn-up slip at the waste-paper basket. It fell in a gentle shower, like confetti, in and around the basket, and Siegfried, still without speaking, wrapped his probang around him and strode from the room. In the kitchen, Mrs. Hall opened the parcel and extracted a pie, a chunk of liver, and a cluster of the exquisite sausages. She turned a quizzical eye on me. "You look kind of pleased with yourself this morning, Mr. Herriot." I leaned back against the oak dresser. "Yes, Mrs. Hall. I've just been thinking. It must be very nice to be the principal of a practice, but, you know, it's not such a bad life being an assistant." Chapter 24. The day had started badly. Tristan had been tracked by his brother at 4 a.m, returning from the bell-ringers outing. The function took place annually when a busload of the bell-ringers of all the local churches made a trip to Morecambe. They spent very little time on the beach, however, and when they weren't working their way from one pub to another, they were attacking the crates of beer they had brought with them. When they rolled into Darrowby in the small hours, most of the occupants of the bus were unconscious. Tristan, an honoured guest of the party, had been tipped out in the back lane behind Skeldale House. He waved weakly as the bus moved away, but drew no response from the unseen faces at the windows. Lurching down the garden path, he was horrified to see a light in Siegfried's room. Escape was impossible, and when asked to explain where he had been, he made a series of attempts to articulate bell-ringers outing without success. Siegfried, seeing he was wasting his time, had saved his wrath till breakfast time. That was when Tristan told me the story, just before his brother came into the dining room and started on him. But, as usual, it seemed to take more out of Siegfried, who went on his rounds, glowering and hoarse from shouting. 10 minutes after he had gone, I found Tristan closeted cheerfully in Boardman's cubbyhole. Boardman listening to some fresh material from the backs of the envelopes and sniggering appreciatively. The old man had cheered up greatly since Tristan came home, and the two of them spent a lot of time in the gloom, where the light from the tiny window picked out the rows of rusting tools, the Bairnsfather cartoons looking down from the wall. The place was usually kept locked and visitors were not encouraged, but Tristan was always welcome. Often when I was passing by, I would peep in and see Tristan patiently pulling at a woodbine, while Boardman rambled on. We were 6 weeks up the line. The French was on our right and the Jocks on our left. Or, poor old Fred. 1 minute he was standing by me and next he was gone. Never found as much as a trouser button. This morning Tristan hailed me boisterously, and I marvelled again at his resilience and his power to bend like a willow before the winds of misfortune and spring back unscathed. He held up 2 tickets. "Village dance tonight, Jim, and I can guarantee it. Some of my harem from the hospital are going, so I'll see you all right. And that's not all. Look here." He went into the saddle room, lifted out a loose board and produced a bottle of sherry. "We'll be able to have a toothful between dances." I didn't ask where the tickets or the sherry had come from. I liked the village dances. The packed hall with the 3-piece band at one end, piano, scraping fiddle and drums, and at the other end the older ladies looking after the refreshments. Glasses of milk, mounds of sandwiches, ham, homemade brawn, trifles heaped high with cream. That evening Tristan came out with me on my last visit, and in the car the talk was all about the dance. The case was simple enough, a cow with an infected eye, but the farm was in a village high up the dale, and when we finished it was dusk. I felt good and everything seemed to stand out clear and meaningful. The single empty grey stone street, the last red streaks in the sky, the dark purple of the enclosing fells. There was no wind, but a soft breath came from the quiet moors, sweet and fresh and full of promise. Among the houses the thrilling smell of wood smoke was everywhere. When we got back to the surgery, Siegfried was out, but there was a note for Tristan propped up on the mantelpiece. It said simply, "Tristan, go home, Siegfried." This had happened before, everything in Scaledale House being in short supply, especially beds and blankets. When unexpected visitors arrived, Tristan was packed off to stay with his mother in Broughton. Normally he would board a train without comment, but tonight was different. "Good God," he said. "Somebody must be coming for the night, and of course I'm the one who's just expected to disappear. It's a nice bloody carry-on, I must say. And isn't that a charming letter? It doesn't matter if I've made any private arrangements. Oh no, there's no question of asking me if it's convenient to leave. It's just, Tristan, go home." Polite and thoughtful, isn't it? It was unusual for him to get worked up like this. I spoke soothingly. "Look, Tris, maybe we'd better just skip this dance. There'll be others." Tristan clenched his fists. "Why should I let him push me around like this?" he fumed. "I'm a person, am I not? I have my own life to lead, and I tell you I am not going to Broughton tonight. I've arranged to go to a dance, and I am damn well going to a dance." This was fighting talk, but I felt a twinge of alarm. "Wait a minute. What about Siegfried? What's he going to say when he comes in and finds you still here?" "To hell with Siegfried," said Tristan, so I left it at that. Siegfried came home when we were upstairs changing. I was first down and found him sitting by the fire reading. I said nothing but sat down and waited for the explosion. After a few minutes, Tristan came in. He had chosen with care among his limited wardrobe and was resplendent in a dark grey suit. A scrubbed face shone under carefully combed hair. He was wearing a clean collar. Siegfried flushed as he looked up from his book. "What the bloody hell are you doing here? I told you to go to Broughton. Joe Ramage is coming tonight." "Couldn't go." "Why not?" "No trains." "What the hell do you mean, no trains?" "Just that. No trains." The cross-talk was bringing on the usual sensitive strain in me. The interview was falling into the habitual pattern. Siegfried, red-faced, exasperated. His brother, expressionless, answering in a flat monotone, fighting a defensive battle with the skill of a long practice. Siegfried sank back in his chair, baffled for the moment, but he kept a slit-eyed gaze on his brother. The smart suit, the slicked hair and polished shoes all seemed to irritate him further. "All right," he said suddenly. It's maybe just as well you are staying. I want you to do a job for me. You can open that hematoma on Charlie Dent's pig's ear." This was a bombshell. Charlie Dent's pig's ear was something we didn't talk about. A few weeks earlier, Siegfried himself had gone to the small holding halfway along a street on the outskirts of the town to see a pig with a swollen ear. It was an oral hematoma, and the only treatment was to lance it, but for some reason Siegfried had not done the job, but had sent me the following day. I had wondered about it, but not for long. When I climbed into the sty, the biggest sow I had ever seen rose from the straw, gave an explosive bark, and rushed at me with its huge mouth gaping. I didn't stop to argue. I made for the wall about 6 inches ahead of the pig and vaulted over into the passage. I stood there considering the position, looking thoughtfully at the mean little red eyes, the slavering mouth with its long yellow teeth. Usually I paid no attention when pigs barked and grumbled at me, but this one really seemed to mean it. As I wondered what the next step would be, the pig gave an angry roar, reared up on its hind legs, and tried to get over the wall at me. I made up my mind quickly. "I'm afraid I haven't got the right instrument with me, Mr. Dent. I'll pop back another day and open the ear for you. It's nothing serious, only a small job. Goodbye." There the matter had rested, with nobody caring to mention it till now. Tristan was aghast. "You mean you want me to go along there tonight? Saturday night? Surely some other time would do. I'm going to a dance." Siegfried smiled bitterly from the depths of his chair. "It has to be done now. That's an order. You can go to your dance afterwards." Tristan started to say something, but he knew he had pushed his luck far enough. "Right," he said. "I'll go and do it." He left the room with dignity. Siegfried resumed his book, and I stared into the fire, wondering how Tristan was going to handle this one. He was a lad of infinite resource, but he was going to be tested this time. Within 10 minutes he was back. Siegfried looked at him suspiciously. "Have you opened the ear?" "No." "Why not?" "Couldn't find the place. You must have given me the wrong address. Number 98, you said." "It's number 89, and you know damn well it is. Now get back there and do your job." The door closed behind Tristan, and again I waited. 15 minutes later it opened again, and Tristan reappeared looking fatally triumphant. His brother looked up from his book. "Done it?" "No." "Why not?" "The family are all out at the pictures. Saturday night, you know." "I don't care a damn where the family are. Just get into that sty and lance the ear. Now get out, and this time I want the job done." Again Tristan retreated, and a new vigil began. Siegfried did not say a word, but I could feel the tension building up. 20 minutes passed, and Tristan was with us again. "Have you opened that ear?" "No." "Why not?" "It's pitch dark in there. How do you expect me to work? I've only got 2 hands, one for the knife and one for the torch. How can I hold the ear?" Siegfried had been keeping a tight hold on himself, but now his control snapped. "Don't give me any more of your bloody excuses," he shouted, leaping from his chair. "I don't care how you do it, but by God you are going to open that pig's ear tonight, or I'll finish with you. Now get the hell out of here and don't come back till it's done." My heart bled for Tristan. He had been dealt a poor hand and had played his cards with rare skill, but he had nothing left now. He stood silent in the doorway for a few moments, then he turned and walked out. The next hour was a long one. Siegfried seemed to be enjoying his book, and I even tried to read myself, but I got no meaning out of the words, and it made my head ache to sit staring at them. It would have helped if I could have paced up and down the carpet, but that was pretty well impossible in Siegfried's presence. I had just decided to excuse myself and go out for a walk when I heard the outer door open, then Tristan's footsteps in the passage. A moment later the man of destiny entered, but the penetrating smell of pig got into the room just ahead of him, and as he walked over to the fire, pungent waves seemed to billow round him. Pig muck was splattered freely over his nice suit and on his clean collar, his face and hair. There was a great smear of the stuff on the seat of his trousers, but despite his ravaged appearance he still maintained his poise. Siegfried pushed his chair back hurriedly, but did not change expression. "Have you got that ear opened?" he asked quietly. "Yes." Siegfried returned to his book without comment. It seemed that the matter was closed, and Tristan, after staring briefly at his brother's bent head, turned and marched from the room. But even after he had gone, the odour of the pigsty hung in the room like a cloud. Later, in the drovers, I watched Tristan draining his 3rd pint. He had changed, and if he didn't look as impressive as when he started the evening, at least he was clean and hardly smelt at all. I had said nothing yet, but the old light was returning to his eye. I went over to the bar and ordered my 2nd half and Tristan's 4th pint, and as I set the glasses on the table, I thought that perhaps it was time. "Well, What happened? Tristan took a long, contented pull at his glass and lit a woodbine. Well now, all in all, Jim, it was rather a smooth operation, but I'll start at the beginning. You can imagine me standing all alone outside the sty in the pitch darkness, with that bloody great pig grunting and growling on the other side of the wall. I didn't feel so good, I can tell you. I shone my torch on the thing's face, and it jumped up and ran at me, making a noise like a lion and showing all those dirty yellow teeth. I nearly wrapped it up and came home there and then, but I got to thinking about the dance and all, and on the spur of the moment I hopped over the wall. 2 seconds later I was on my back. It must have charged me, but couldn't see enough to get a bite in. I just heard a bark, then a terrific weight against my legs, and I was down. Well, it's a funny thing, Jim. You know I'm not a violent chap, but as I lay there, all my fears vanished, and all I felt was a cold hatred of that bloody animal. I saw it as the cause of all my troubles, and before I knew what I was doing, I was up on my feet and booting its arse round and round the sty. And do you know, it showed no fight at all. That pig was a coward at heart. I was still puzzled. But the ear, how did you manage to open the hematoma? No problem, Jim. That was done for me. You don't mean to say? Yes, Tristan said, holding his pint up to the light and studying a small foreign body floating in the depths. Yes, it was really very fortunate. In the scuffle in the dark, the pig ran up against the wall and burst the thing itself. Made a beautiful job.